Hi, Shane again, back for my week 3 update. As you can see, I'm currently connected up for this week's chemotherapy. This week, as well as letting you know where I'm up to with my treatment, I thought I'd talk about the financial impact that cancer treatment can have on you personally and the community at large. So I'll be back with a little bit of information on that shortly. Welcome back. Shane here, reporting on my week 3 progress. And this week I thought I would also have a talk about the cost of cancer treatment, both at a personal level in terms of out-of-pocket expenses, and even reflect on the cost to the public system. For those in Australia, the recent federal election touched on the cost of cancer treatment to patients. The opposition put forward a proposal to increase or improve reimbursement for people with cancer treatment out-of-pocket expenses, and of course the government responded by saying that it's nothing new and that it's what they were promising was the same as existed already. But in any case, that election's been and gone. I've included a few links to some articles related to both federal election promises and also some general information on the out-of-pocket costs to cancer patients. But first, let's just do a quick week 3 update. I've just finished my 3rd week. Today was the chemo infusion, and I'm entering that 4th or middle week of treatment, which last time I found is when a lot of the side effects started to stack up. At the moment though, I'm still travelling pretty well. Radiation side effects haven't become a lot more apparent, other than just that left arm feeling a little heavy. As one doctor put it, it feels like I've just slept on it and has gone to sleep a little. Chemo-wise, definitely some of those side effects are kicking in. Quite a lot of that tinnitus, bell ringing sound in my ears, feeling a little flat. I wouldn't say nauseous, as in vomiting type feeling, but certainly not feeling great, like I was hungover basically. But yeah, it's certainly not as bad as last time, and I think that's because, if you recall, the radiation I'm getting is sort of from the neck down over my chest and shoulder on this occasion, whereas before it was squarely across my throat, and all of those sensitive structures were starting to be impacted by weeks 3 and 4, and I was getting ulcers and mucositis, xerostomia, which is dry mouth, and dysphagia, which is alteration of my taste sensation. So far, this is a little kinder treatment than I had before. So a quick update on the Prado. We've taken it in, had the quotes for repair of the damage, and that's all approved. So in a week or 2, we'll drop the car in and we'll lose it for a week or so while they do those repairs. But yeah, again, life goes on. This is another sort of important week for us. Originally, we were planning to take an overseas holiday starting this coming weekend. We're going to go to Iceland and Norway, 2 places that we've long wanted to go and see, and unfortunately we had to cancel that trip when the recurrence of my cancer was found. And although we've done pretty well with refunds and rescheduling to a new set of dates next year, inevitably, because it was recurrence of cancer, some of our insurance didn't cover all of our costs. So even though I'll talk around the primary care costs today, there's those things you need to consider, that if you had a holiday planned and it has to be cancelled, or any other event for that matter, those are of course are costs that have to be covered from somewhere, because often insurance won't do it. As part of today's update, I thought I'd talk about my cancer care costs, which at the moment add up to around $262,000, which is a lot of money. But I'll describe the breakdown of that and explain how the biggest portion of it is actually being funded by one of the bad guys of cancer care, and that is a pharmaceutical company. So we'll jump into that shortly. See, if we start to break down the cost of my cancer treatment to date, you'll see that it's being funded by quite a few parties. You have to forgive me, I'm going to have to check my notes here because chemo brain means I can't remember all of this at the moment, but you'll see out of that $1.5 billion per annum, they can break it down largely into different cancer types. And so unfortunately, head and neck cancers, which mine is classified as, are one of the more expensive to treat. And for a typical patient, there's a lifetime cost of around $95,000. Now, that's quite a bit lower than the 260 odd I mentioned. The reason for that is that part of my cost, around 190 odd thousand of it, is actually being covered by a pharmaceutical company who is sponsoring a clinical trial for a cancer drug called pembrolizumab, also called Keytruda. Now, it's a drug that's currently on the PBS list for lung cancer and a few others, but it's not on the list for head and neck cancer. And this trial, which is an international trial, of which I was invited to be a part, is to gain approval for its use with head and neck cancer. Now, I've signed up for every trial they threw at me because I believe that the more people looking at my condition, assessing me, and providing whatever mechanism they can to cure this thing is worth me taking on. It hasn't come without its cost in terms of side effects and personal cost outlay, but I figure if they're going to tip $190,000 worth of treatment towards me, I'll gladly take that, even if it only improves my chances by a few percent. So for now, let's put that amount of money aside. You'll see that there's still a substantial cost outlay being funded by the public health system or by me personally. Now, one of the reasons that head and neck cancers are so difficult and expensive to treat is there's a lot of sensitive structures and organs in this area of our body. We've got a swallowing mechanism, our breathing tube, taste, saliva, thyroid, your spinal column, a whole range of structures in here which are very easily damaged and very sensitive. Blood supply to our brain, muscles to control our head and neck. All of these things take a pounding during cancer treatment, and unfortunately all of them nearly I'm carrying some sort of side effect, whether it be limited movement, difficulty swallowing, etc. So that brings not only the primary treatment but a whole range of aftercare and lifetime support requirements for a lot of people, which drives the cost up. So we start to drill into those figures. You'll see that there's around $61,000 of cost on the public system. The biggest part of that, almost half, is the 2 rounds of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And these costs have come straight out of the Medicare system. So I'm not sure if there's some other hidden costs in there around day treatment and use of the hospital facilities, but certainly that's where most of the cost outlay has gone. It's around 250 odd bucks a day for the radiation machine. There's quite a few $1,000s in planning for each course of radiation, and each time I go in to have chemo, it's around another $1,000, which is a weekly event. So you can see those numbers would add up pretty quickly. The neck dissection surgery came in at just under 10 grand. And that was because I had some complications there as well as the surgery to remove all these lymph nodes. I had a complication called a chyle leak, which is where your thoracic duct brings chyle fluid up from your stomach area and deposits it into your bloodstream. And that caused me to be in hospital for an extra week while they brought that under control and could release me. Plus, of course, you've got anaesthetics and a whole range of on costs when you have surgery. 61 grand for public system coverage over a 2-year period. And hopefully, if I get a good result from this treatment, there won't be much more to that. There'll be another 5 years of follow-up with 3 monthly, then 6 monthly, then 12 monthly monitoring visits to the clinic. which is relatively low in cost compared to the primary treatment. If we jump into the personal out-of-pocket expenses, you'll see that they're around $9,000. In one of my first videos, I joked that parking is the most expensive cancer treatment, and it is. The reason it isn't the dearest part of my out-of-pocket expenses, though, is most hospitals, when you're in the situation of having to go there every day, will give you some sort of concession for your parking. So with all of these out-of-pocket costs, I really encourage you to stay in contact with your cancer care coordinator, and they'll also liaise, or you can talk directly with the hospital social worker, and they can show you the loopholes and systems and processes to get through it with as low a cost impact as you can. So while parking was still a considerable amount of money, it wasn't the dearest. The most expensive out-of-pocket cost to us was over-the-counter medication at chemists. One of the complexities of radiation in your throat is you suffer a lot of pain. Swallowing even water, liquids, but particularly food, is a really painful experience, and I ended up on opiate-based painkillers for many months, and you pay for those over the counter, and unfortunately that adds up to a considerable amount of money. Initially you put out a lot of money, particularly during the diagnosis and the stage before you come into the public system. So a lot of tests, ultrasounds, the initial scans, MRI, etc. Are all paid for directly. But Medicare kicks in, and for those of us in Australia, depending on which doctor you go to and whether you bulk billed, the amount that you left out of pocket varies. In my case it was a reasonable amount of money, but I wouldn't call it outlandish, and Medicare picked up to around $1,800 of gap payments there. Ended up having to spend around $1,000 on dietary supplements because I had a peg tube, and I needed to take liquid meals directly into my stomach through that tube. So you have to pay for those. They come pre-packaged, and it was around $200 a week while I was having to be fed that way. Now that can go for as short or as long as necessary. Some people don't need a peg tube at all. It just depends on the size of their tumour and the nature of their treatment. And a few $100s there for other, and that's just little bits and pieces we got from the chemist or supermarket even, but things that were specific to my cancer treatment. Example is a hot and cold pack to put on your neck to help relieve some of that pain. A whole range of things that weren't really chemist supplies or medications as such. So a lot of money, and I really understand that if you're in a regional area, you've got travel costs on top of that, which can add up to a lot of money, which is partly subsidised, but inevitably you're out of pocket. The one I haven't listed here, because it's very personal and everybody's situation is different, is the matter of lost income. Thankfully, I had the foresight to have income protection insurance, and that pays me up to 75% of my normal salary. So whenever I can't work for whatever reason, I get on 25% down. Now, because of that, and because my insurance company were a little bit hard to get along with to begin with, I worked part-time through treatment to the best of my ability. But there's no doubt I'm going to be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 out of pocket after a few years of this. There's also the matter of Suzanne, my partner, having to either use her leave, and right now she's actually elected to take leave at half pay so that she can stretch her leave longer while I need her support to drive me in and out of hospital and that type of thing. And that'll come at a cost because ultimately her income is also reduced. So for us, the out-of-pocket expenses of around $9,000 is a lot of money, but thankfully we could manage it. The much bigger financial cost is the setback of lost income, and I'm sure for a lot of people that's really the bigger issue here. if you don't have income protection insurance and you're approaching your 40s or 50s, and you can afford it, it's certainly something I would encourage. It's one of the things I'm very, very thankful that I did. So that pretty well wraps it up. I won't dwell on it. Dollars and cents can get a bit boring for some people, but it's usually a question I get asked is the cost of healthcare. We all see on Facebook these things around, why give methadone for free to drug addicts when cancer patients pay for treatment. And I don't really agree with that. I think our system, at least in Australia, is really, really good. And I feel completely looked after by the system and by society. And I guess if you're a taxpayer, I thank you for that. There's really, it's difficult and you've got to watch where your money goes, but it isn't, for me, the bigger issue. I think most of us would spend 9 or 10 grand in a heartbeat if we thought it would save our own life. So if you put it in that context, it's pretty reasonable. I guess the bigger one for me was that clinical trial that I was approached for, and I really encourage you to ask that question, because some of these drugs, even if you become the guinea pig, and you may even only end up on a placebo, but there's a whole range of benefits over and above the drug itself, particularly in terms of the extra monitoring that you receive and vigilance around your condition. That pretty well wraps up my week 3 update, and we're now entering week 4, which is usually when things start to get a bit more interesting. Hopefully I'll still be able to stay pretty chipper. Nobody wants to watch me moping around, but I guess if I'm to be honest with you through this experience, I need to let you know when things aren't travelling so well. Next week I've got a bit of news for you actually, so stay tuned for that one. A bit of a surprise. Otherwise, I'll talk to you in a week or so and let you know how week 4 has treated me. Talk to you soon.